Hello everyone. I found some bark on the land, pine bark, and I thought to myself, I've been thinking this for a while, how would I go about, breaking this down enough to turn it into a medium for propagation of cuttings? And so I came up with a system that I think will ease the transition from straight up bark over to a finer powder. And here's what I'm thinking. So you get the bark like this off the log, right? And this was just lying around. It's a couple years old. You break it, preferably into sections like that, actually. Okay, you break it. And if you can't break it like that, you can always take one of these and just something like that, and then so you break it down into these little fist-size nuggets, right? And from there, well, I just wanted to do a demonstration. I already did a bunch of these, but you would take it like this, right here. Break it down into a smaller piece. Break it down, and then you go widthways on it. You get thinner slices. And you break those down. And you see how I'm just hitting it like that, right there? And you snap it and throw it. So that's how you can break down the nuggets. So that's one of the main issues, is how to break it down enough to put it in. And then you have all this leftover stuff. Keep it. Because what we're going to do is something quite okay, so right there, that's what it looks like when it's broken down. That's the leftover stuff. We're going to come over here, grab the blender. Okay, and we're only going to take a couple of these guys at a time. And that's why we made them smaller. You see, some of the bark can be rather thick. So what we do is we splice it in half, and it gets a little bit thinner. Now we don't want to put too much in, and don't put any water in this. So you have a little bit at a time. We're going to see how much that actually makes, and that right there too. So we come over here, bam, it's locked in. This is for food, for like smoothies and stuff, but it also works pretty good for this too. Red means it's on, right there, and crush. You want to crush it. Make sure the lid's on. You'll hear a certain noise, and tap it a little bit, and when you hear that settling noise, that basically means that it's ground down. I mean, look, it went from that right there, which is, chunks worth, as you can tell, right there. It went from chunks worth, and again, to that right there. And we just throw a couple more in, just a little bit at a time, and no water, because water will gum up the system. And then you turn it on. You make sure you're locked in. This has a safety to it. And then you crush it. it starting to settle and how it's not jumping as much, that's a good sign. So when it gets to that point of not jumping up as much and you hear the noise kind of starting to settle down, you can go ahead and look at it and see that it's pretty good. Now, remember, we started out with big pieces of bark like this, then we brought it down to that size, and then ultimately we even took this, cut it in half this way, and then half, and then we quartered it into these things right here. Then we took these one last time, once we got to this point, and threw a couple in there, not too many. You don't want to gum up the machine, and put them in there. It's on, it's locked. We powered it. You see how it's jumping? So let it settle. See right there, it's starting to settle. Right there, and you can see that it looks very ground. Tap the top, wipe it off, tap it, press the button. Yours may be a little bit different. You may have a different method of going about to do this. And right there, and as you can tell, it's very, turns into like a powder. It's quite amazing. And the final product, because I actually do have the final product. You see, I wanted to do a video with the final product. And the final product is quite interesting. This right here. Now this is that stuff, just water added. And I really think, I mean, go ahead, look at that. Here, let's bring this outside. It really sticks to you. Now again, this is that bark right there. That's all this is. There's no additives. There's no environmentally safe whatever. And what I wanted to show you was, look at that. And it's nice and wet. You see it holds. You see the water coming out. It holds a good amount of water. And a lot of people use this type of bark. They use a fine fir bark. This is fine pine bark. So it's a little bit more acidic, but on the pH level. However, as far as too much like with dirt and stuff, you have all those microorganisms and stuff that'll do good for soil. This is neutral in that sense. Not neutral in the pH sense, but neutral in the other sense. So it's not loaded with pests and stuff as far as I know. So we went from that to that to that to the grinder, and then we wet it. And this is a lot. I found that bark right there is a lot like the cocoa husk that you'll get. They call it cocoa core for propagation. This is very similar to that in the sense of it takes a good amount of water and it has to soak it all in. And I mean, look, it's very gritty, just like the cocoa husk. And all this is the bark off a pine tree that's been sitting out in the field. There's literally 2 good-sized pieces, and I should have enough here. I'll process the rest of that some other time. I'm going to do the rest of this and what's on the steps right there, because that's all good little stuff. I should have enough for at least 2 more bowls like this, rounded right off. I could do a heaping bowl where it goes over the top, but a nice flat bowl like that. And as you can tell, this is what it looks like. It does take a good amount of water, and you gotta kind of mix it. But when you're doing this process, so far what I found is you don't want to add water, because water will gum up the machine and the blades and the nuggets over here that we took a long time to break down, from 3 different stages. they'll gum up on the blades with water, so the drier the better. Now, of course, you're going to have a little bit of like pine pitch because it's a pine tree. By the way, that green tree right there, that's a very young pine tree, maybe 20, 25 years old. This one right here, just by the look of the bark, I would have to say whatever log this came off from, it was probably close to 75 to 80 years old. You can tell how rough and coarse the bark is. Now that's the stuff you're looking for. When I say, because it's it's hard to find the definition, right? Because you're like, oh, find a pine bark, right? A tree like this will not suffice because the bark is too smooth, it's wiry, it's too young, really. Actually, you can tell I did a bunch of trimming on this tree. I took the hatch and I hit the sides all the way up to just because I wanted room for, if you look underneath, propagation right there, all that shade. And I got some stuff being propagated, root forms. So right here. This is way too small. You see, this is also white pine. This is way too young of a tree because it's just too wiry and the blades won't be able to cut it. You won't be able to chop it. You need a log. You need, maybe I could show you. If you look at the base of that tree, it's just starting to get rough. Like I said, it's about 25 years of age. And what I did, you can see from here all the way over. That's a spruce tree over there. The reason I did this air layer was to allow for a breeze to come through to keep things cool, but there's enough shade where all these aren't in direct sunlight. So the point being, you know what? I may try those pine needles. If I can grind those up, oh, that'd be very good, actually. The point being is when you're looking for the right type of tree, right? Look for an older pine tree. If you go to a lumber yard, most likely, at least in America, they're going to be processing spruce, fir, and pine, the three main types for building, right? And sorry, there I am. And when they do that, what's happening is they're processing white pine like this, red pine, and see that right there? So they're processing, white pine, red pine, spruce, and fir, because those are the four best for, well, first off, they grow abundantly around here in North America, and they're the best for getting a lot of sticks out of one log, and you'll have a lot of this bark, probably like this right here though, the rougher, bigger stuff. You'll have to break it down. Now, if you could find somebody who does this process right here on a bigger scale where you can get it by the yard, that may be a very viable option, because I know fine fir bark is very good. Now, this is a test stage. How do I, here, let me set this up. Okay, this is a test stage. I don't know how this stuff is going to perform when it comes to propagation. I just know some people use the fine fir bark, so I'm like, why couldn't I use like a fine pine bark? Because pine is abundant in this area, just like some places have the fir tree. It's a type of conifer tree, which is an evergreen, evergreen tree, right? So I'm like, well, we have an abundance of mostly eastern white pine. Now, if you go to the south, you have the yellow pine, And of course, in between both areas, you have the red pine. But abundantly, this eastern white pine, that's what it's called, that the bark is abundant. I mean, nobody really does anything with the bark. What they actually will do is, if they can, they'll rip it off say they get a 10-foot log, or a log that's 9 meters uh, in length, right? Which is roughly about 10 feet if I'm doing the math right in my head. So most of the times, to save on blades and sharpness with the mills, they'll take this stuff off to begin with. Now, it will look like huge pieces of this, probably taller than me and wider than me, but that's okay, because if you can take it, and let's say you have a wood chipper. If you could chip it down into little nuggets, and yes, this method right here takes a long time, but essentially you could have as much as this as you needed, you know. So I just wanted to go through the step of how I got from the rough. Well, here, I'll show you how I got from what comes straight off the tree to what I think, now I'm not certain, what I think God will allow for a good medium to be. You see the process? We went from A to B, and I think that's highly important. Now, of course, I will do an updated video to show you me using this, and then another one to show whether this stuff right here actually works or not. It's trial by error. I'm not advertising for this stuff at all. I'm just saying it's probably another resource that you could possibly use. Of course, I'm going to do experimental trials on simple cutting and plants as such, and we'll work our way up. We'll see if there's too much acid in this. How can we, level that out so it's neutral? As far as disease goes, it's pretty much the bark. So it may have disease because it protects the tree from a lot of stuff, but it also may be resistant to a lot of disease. So again, it goes on both sides of the scale. I'm just thinking, as far as retaining water and draining well, this stuff, and being dense the way it is once it's wet, it's a lot like coco coir. So that's all I have for now. God bless all of you. Have a great Sunday. And for some of you, it's Monday. Have a great Monday. And this is Gort with just a little side thing that I thought you all would like. Blessings. God loves you. Your brother in Christ over here. I love you too. And stay sharp. No, I won't end with that. Sorry. Gort out.